Hello and welcome to Occult Lives. Here we are at Atlantis Bookshop in London. Today I'm going to be speaking to Jack Gale, who is a poet, an author and a magic man. So Jack, what have you got for us today?
Well, what I've got today is a little group, a little clutch, shall we say, of poems, 8 poems, and there is a unifying theme, which is Glastonbury. Glastonbury is a very special place to me. It's kind of my other home, or perhaps it is my home, in a weird, convoluted sort of a way. It's an intensely magical place. I don't believe there's anywhere else quite like it on the surface of the planet, and it can induce ecstasy just as easily as it can induce madness. It's a very complex dynamic there. When you're there, I do seriously believe you're in two worlds at the same time. But I tend to live in two worlds at the same time anyway. So it's just a little bit more so for me, and it's probably why I feel so at home when I'm there. So the first poem is one called For Sue, and it takes the form of a sort of perambulation, a kind of a wander around Glastonbury, and wander around this magical place, taking in a few important landmarks on the way. And it seemed a logical way to start a little collapse of Glastonbury poems, and I'd like to end in on similar vein, actually. Another wander round, close things down and bring them to a conclusion. And Sue is the love of my life, my soulmate, a very special person to me. She passed on in 2001, but she's always with me. And this is by no means a sad poem. It's a glowy little Earth Mysteries love poem. All about interacting with the sacred landscape with someone you love. What more could anyone expect? It's a great thing to do. And it's dedicated to her. I would just like to say a few very brief words about some of the things that are mentioned in the poem. If you've never been to Glastonbury, it doesn't matter in the slightest. And some of the names you can treat as metaphors. It's nice if a poem can have more than one meaning. So, the Rainbow's End is a very lovely cafe, actually in Glastonbury, and it is located at the end of a funny little corridor. The corridor reminds me of the places that the surrealists tended to frequent in the Paris of the between the wars period. The Passage de l'Opéra, which Louis Aragon wrote so much about. The little sunless corridor ending up in this wonderful cafe. And it also mentions a place called Paradise, which is a geographical location in Glastonbury. If you've never been there, it doesn't matter, because it can equally mean paradise in other ways. Interpret how you will. The Michael line is mentioned, which is a Beltane sunrise alignment, originally written off, I suppose, by the great godfather of Earth Mysteries in this country, Mr. John Michel, the late and wonderful John Michel. It mentions Gwyn and his towering antlers, the fairy lord who dwells inside Glastonbury Tower, and many of us still see him as doing that. And the brew. Doesn't mean a witch's brew. It can if you want it to. Spelt B-R-U-E, and this is a river with very strong Arthurian associations that runs through Glastonbury. Anyway, that's enough old chat. Let's hear the poem. For Sue. Meet me in the corridor outside the Rainbow's End. I'll get myself a pass, and time together we can spend. We'll wander up the high street and we'll window shop for two. Holding hands, we'll climb the tower, and we'll take in the view. As sun shines down on Avalon, I know we'll feel so right. Our two hearts close and glowing and our footsteps light. We'll picnic up in paradise as we did once before. Partake of wine and sandwiches, and of our love feel sure. Let's stroll down Wellhouse Lane again, en route for Chalice Well, to drink the Red Springs waters and listen to the bell. Let's linger in the gardens at the setting of the sun, and stay all night to watch the nature spirits having fun. With you, I'll jump the Michael line and thread the winding maze. I'll see Gwyn's towering antlers through the early morning haze. We'll toss gold coins into the brew, and with them spells we'll send. So meet me in the corridor, outside the Rainbow's End.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Thank you. Now, the next poem is called Chapter 8, and if you've ever come across my book, The Circle and the Square, which was published way back in 1997, this will be familiar terrain for you. This particular this particular poem is a retelling in verse of events recounted in chapter 8 of the book. The book is focused upon that weird and strange and deviant activities, psychic questing. I jest, folks, but it is pretty strange. And the term, as I'm sure you all know, was invented by Mr. Andrew Collins, author of a number of amazing books on that subject. And it's where you're investigating a historical enigma or a landscape mystery, to quote Andrew Collins, and you're going out into the sacred landscape, and that you're interacting with the landscape and its spirits in a very up-close and personal way. And all manner of quite amazing things can happen. So in this poem it's about that, and about interaction not just with the landscape and its spirits, but also interaction between three questers. And this happened back in the early Feb of 1994. Now towards the end of the poem, somebody referred to mysteriously as the Joker turns up. He's very much a part of life in Glastonbury, particularly a part of its weirdness, and he will turn up again in a subsequent poem in which he takes centre stage. But in this one he just drifts in and out, as is his wont. Chapter 8. Night mist stealthily settling as the cries of peacocks cut the air. Sunset sky gently ablaze, cold increasing keenly as, in fading winter daylight, we wandered among Avebury's ancient stones, feet chilled by long wet grass. A common quest inspired us, yet we walked knee-deep in sub-agendas. I fancied her, she fancied him, and he longed for someone yet unknown. Three modern musketeers, drawn by a quest without end. Strolling up the tiny high street, we found a cottage, asymmetrical and fairy tale, built from megaliths hijacked from a henge 2 centuries previously. Telltale half-drawn curtains just allowing us to peer in, to glimpse that oaken chair which we had sought, bearing strange symbols devised by a magus. Thus we knew the questing genie was not about to disappoint. Almost 24 hours earlier, we had paused at Stonehenge close to midnight. Nervous security men watching us cautiously. Courteous and friendly, but glad to see us drive away. From a distant hillstone within a vision, we saw presences. Presences leaping and dancing within the circle. So fitting for approaching Imbolc with full moon just past. Then on to Glaston, bladders empty and comfortable, coasting down through Edgley at 1:30 a.m, our destination reached. On the Tor's lower slopes we spent the night, sleeping on Blybon's Hill of Dreams, manic wind from nowhere tearing at the fabric of our B&B, glad of warm beds and tea-making facilities, simple, mundane things, and magical, yet much needed. We ate our breakfast and then made for town, rejoicing as we saw the levels washed with morning sunlight, St. Michael's Tower looming above us, watching. And so to the ruined abbey, for echoes and lingering splinters of sunken memory, to the Lady Chapel and the calm oasis of St. Joseph's Well. In the gardens of the Chalice Well we tasted Morgan's water, cold, iron-rich and sacred, watched as ever by the Tower of Doom. Beneath the Tor, where the White Spring flows, a pagan shopkeeper took us to his hidden room, alive with tingling darkness, followed by climbing the holy hill, deviating from the steps to drag ourselves up across the mud, moving awkwardly to reach that sacred cleft, the place of pilgrimage and votive offerings, with gnarled and twisted hawthorn guardians, 100 ribbons cracking in the freezing, ceaseless wind. We offered fruit juice to the holy ground, and I gave the gift of music with slow, tin-whistled Celtic airs. and in a voice advised us to depart. Our slow response rewarded by my trip, my hand plunging into a bed of stinging nettles. A quest had driven us and held us in its grip, pointers, clues, and the red herrings of the Joker, littering our way, some only registering below the level of our consciousness. That night we dined in style, eating at the Pilgrim's Inn, a place so heavy with the past. Then back to the B&B, where before bed we joked, laughed, and felt a sense of solidarity, a certain knowledge that together there was little that we could not accomplish. A year later, the Joker played another hand, and we were scattered as to the four winds. 3 ships, once passing in the night, now steering very different courses, and all so very Glastonbury.
Your book, The Circle and the Square, that's currently out of print, is that correct?
No, the Circle and the Square is in print.
Oh,
all my
it's in, right.
all my Capelbaum books are in print.
Right, that's good to know.
The only book I've done which is out of print is one that was published by a little publishing house which I won't mention because it went bust. It's called Other Meridians and Other Greenwich, and it's got a rather quaint little black and white cover with fairies dancing and Greenwich Observatory and Greenwich Park in the background, and came out in 1993. So
if anyone wanted any of your
back in
books,
time and space. If anyone wants any of my
the
books,
Amazon.
well, you can go to Capelbaum. I mean, Capelbaum will very happily sell them to you. The first one I did for them was Goddesses, Guardians and Groves. We now call it Goddesses, Guardians and Grooves, by the way, 'cause it's a bit hip sounding, and it's a bit of an in-joke. They've all got names, by the way, joke names, these books, and yeah, that came out in I wrote it in 94 and it came out in 96, and I'm delighted to say it's still in print. I mean, a lot of the Sacred Greenwich material has come along since then, but it's quite a nice little primer. I'm still quite proud of what I did then. I had mixed feelings about my first book, Other Meridians and Other Greenwich, in a funny sort of way. I'm glad it's not available. If you want it, try the internet. It does occasionally crop up on the net, but not too often. I was at a moot one night and a guy came up to me with a copy of it and he said, "Can you sign this?" And I said, "Where the hell did you get that from?" And he grinned and he showed me what was stamped in the book. And it said, "County Antrim Public Libraries, withdrawn stock sale." And it cost something like 50p.
I wonder how many people took it out.
I wonder how many people did. Yeah, that's right. They still got it in one of the Greenwich libraries, West Greenwich Reference Library. They've actually still got it, which is quite nice. But and then, of course, we have a joke name for Magic for the Next 1,000 Years, which we call Magic for the Next 20 Minutes. Circle and the Square, I mean, it's a bit difficult to make a joke of in a way, but it has been referred to as the Sphere and the Cube. It's not quite so witty, though. I didn't make that one up. I didn't make any of them up, actually. So now to the good old, dear old, wonderful Glastonbury Zodiac. I can't really say anything enough. I can't muster sufficient enthusiasm for that. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I love the Glastonbury Zodiac. I could talk about it all night. And once again, I mean, we've got an audience of mixed pagans here, haven't we, listening at home or wherever they're listening. And a lot of them, I would imagine, will know at least something about the Glastonbury Zodiac, but for the benefit of those who don't, it wouldn't do any harm just to sort of quickly shoot through a brief description. A giant landscape figure related to the Zodiac itself, the 12 signs, 12 stations of the Zodiac, and it's basically a huge planispheric diagram set out on the Earth with a diameter of over 10 miles, and it's delineated by a strange mixture of natural and human-made features. I didn't say man-made because I think that's a wee bit out of date now. That and people saying I'm politically incorrect if I do that, right?
Men and women made it.
Men and women made. People made. Why not? Now, it was discovered, as much as you can discover something like this, or perhaps rediscovered even, by Catherine Maltwood, a very talented mystic, sculptor and artist in the 1920s, and then subsequently developed by the very wonderful Mary Cain, the late Mary Cain. I was quite involved with Mary Kane on odd occasions and helped her to get some of her books published, which had languished in cupboards for a long time. And I feel that knowing her, and perhaps being involved with her and helping her to get some of her older stuff out was a great honour. She was a wonderful lady, actually. Now, we're talking, this poem's actually about a figure that lies, strictly speaking, outside of the Zodiac, and it guards the western approach to it, and it's a gigantic hound. It's called the Girt Dog of Langport, and anybody who's a folkie, or a folk roots person, as I myself am, who's listening in today may remember the Somerset Wassail song. The Girt Dog of Langport has burned his long tail, and this is the night we go singing wassail. And I still have a job to say that without feeling the hair on the back of my neck standing up, because it's wonderful to get that actual reference there. Deep, knee-deep in the tradition, that's great. It's partly delineated by the River Parrot, the hound's body. You've got some wonderful correlating place names like Wag on the dog's tail and Earlake Moor beside the dog's head. I mean, I love all that stuff. Correlatory place names are very, very important. It's one of the things that fascinated me with my early research on sacred Greenwich, because you've got these wonderful place names like Plum Pudding Hill and Snow Hill on the delightful Maidenstone Hill. What a name for pagans to play with that is, for pagan researchers. So it guards the western approach, and this poem, like a lot of nice works of art do, and in fact I'm working now on an entire book on this subject, it really created itself and formed itself out of nothing and just came out, and all I had to do was hold the pen, really. And it's called the Girt Dog of Langport. I've been working magically with the Girt Dog of Langport a bit at that time, and I think he wanted to have his say, or she, it depends how you see it. I mean, I think there's room for both interpretations. So let's let the good old woofer speak. The Girt Dog of Langport. Full 5 miles long from nose to tail across the Michael line, a sentry stationed in the west, this ceaseless task is mine. I watch o'er the great Zodiac forever and a day, a sleepless canine sentinel who guards the hidden way. When Catherine found me on the map, I'd been there many years. I'd blend into the background, only showing up to seers. But seek, and you will find the clues, like Wag where hangs my tail, and Earlake Moor beside my head, to help you on the trail. Upon my breast the hill of oaths, where once in days long past men swore their solemn promises, and then the die was cast. To Athelney King Alfred came and sat upon my nose. At Borough Mump he burned the cakes, but then in glory rose. The royalists burnt my orchards up, and singed my handsome tail. But it was they who lost the fight, and never did prevail. For I am made of sterner stuff, so treat me with respect. Much more than just a diagram, the guard of the elect. With eyes to see, look hard, you seers, and see my shape unfold. Just let the landscape guide your sight, and my tale will be told. They say I'm formed by man-made marks, which may your credit beg. But let me ask you, what came first? The chicken or the egg?
Brilliant.
I love that one.
Yeah.
I really love that one. I'm very fond of that poem.
Right, that's on, so it's ready when you are.
Wonderful. Thank you, Debbie. That can be left in there. Debbie. Nice to have a laugh, isn't it?
Over to you.
Ooh, a bit of a laugh, isn't it, right? This is a poem called Some Said He Was a Fairy in Disguise, and it's about an intriguing occult phenomenon. Do make reference to Glastonbury in it. It's not essentially a Glastonbury poem, but Glastonbury does come into it, and it's quite an important part of the material that it covers. It's a seldom discussed subject, the subject of people of part fairy descent, people born of mortals. Apparently physically human, they are physically human, born of mortal mothers, and yet in other ways, in terms of inner energetics and inner lineage and inner genetics, in fact, not entirely human. Now, this is a phenomenon that you'll find a great deal about in our traditional balladry, which tends to strike a cautionary note. There are many, many ballads like Clark Colville. You've got a man falling in love with a mermaid, somebody composed of the element of water, and a disastrous and tragic ending. On the other hand, that glorious and wonderful ballad Thomas the Rhymer, True Thomas sitting on Huntley Bank and along comes the dear old Queen of Elfland, takes rather a different tone, and it doesn't do too badly. He goes away with her for 7 years and has a ball, I should think. He has a great time there. Comes back with the gift of prophecy, and there's a wonderful line in Thomas the Rhymer that always makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, because I've been involved in this kind of thing myself. When the Queen of Elfland is about to take him up on a horse and whisk him off to Elfland, and she says, "If you will but kiss my lips, sure of your body I will be." What a wonderful line. I think if I'd been Thomas, I wouldn't have had any doubts about where I was going. Someone says something like that to you, you don't think twice, do you? I certainly wouldn't anyway. Now, coming forward in time, it was this phenomenon was written of a lot by some of the classic, shall we say, English occultists, such as Dion Fortune and Geoffrey Hudson, and a now sadly rather neglected Murray Hope. Dion didn't mince her words, dear old Dion. She was of her time. I've got a lot of time for her and a lot of admiration for her. I mean, a lot of the views she held were dated by modern standards, but we've all got to evolve, and things do evolve, and long may it continue. When discussing this particular subject, she said, these people who are part fairy descent, and she did go into the sort of mechanics of how this might happen in birth terms in her book, The Esoteric Philosophy of Love and Marriage. A book in very little demand now, not terribly surprising. It's a bit like her book, The Psychology of the Servant Problem. No, but let's not take the piss out of dear old Dion too much. I think she was a very worthy person in many ways and wrote some great stuff as well, as did many of them. And she said, you can tell these people by their barnyard morality. Basically, they would have sex with anything that should still belong on earth, or even if it ran away, they'd run after it. And generally, in her view, they seemed to be totally mad, Well, it was not what you'd call a terribly flattering view. Now, the title of the poem, Some Said He Was a Fairy in Disguise, comes from the writings of the theosophist Geoffrey Hodson. Now, Hodson's a man I rate very highly as an author. He wrote a beautiful book called Fairies at Work and Play. It was simply a record of clairvoyantly observed fairy behaviour, a lovely, lovely book, and you don't have to be a theosophist to read it. There's some wonderful descriptions in that book. It's quite an enlightening book, actually. He was of his time. He rather saw things as Dion saw them in terms of these people of part human and part fairy descent. And Some Said He Was a Fairy in Disguise refers to the great male Russian ballet dancer of the early 20th century, Nijinsky, who danced with Diaghilev's ballet Russe. And one of the strange things about Mr. Nijinsky was he had an uncanny knack of doing a terrific leap and then seeming to stand still in the air. It was almost like levitation. He seemed to pause in the air and hover in the air before he came down. Now, if just one person had seen this, you could thought, well, maybe they'd nodded off, or maybe their eyes were playing tricks. But many, many people remarked on it, and in fact, the grandfather of a friend of mine actually went to see Nijinsky when the Ballet Russe were touring in England, and they came to London, and he was absolutely blown away, and he talked about it for years afterwards. This fantastic guy and there's no tricks, no wires or anything, and this man's leaping and hanging up there, and then coming down. Now, Geoffrey Hodson opined this was because the guy was of part fairy descent. And he said, like many of this kind, he died of failed reason in an asylum. And he seemed to think that said it all. Murray Hope, however, who I mentioned her being rather neglected now, wrote quite a few worthwhile books, especially one called Celtic Magic. And she mentions in the book that when she had a psychotherapy practice, and one of her clients was in fact a part human and part fairy descent, and she said he was a jolly nice guy. He was a lovely man, and she got really well with him, and he wasn't shagging everything. He wasn't mad. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with people who shag everything and are mad anyway, but he wasn't, and it was quite a reasonable guy, she thought. So that's a nice little balance there. Anyway, let's get on with it. Enough from me about that now. Some said he was a fairy in disguise. Nijinsky dancing with the Ballet Russe. leaping, soaring skywards and staying up there, or so it seemed, cheating the pull of gravity for a moment, remaining airborne in a manner most unearthly, flying high, then falling into fate's cruel jaws, madness and death rewarding divergence and sheer grace. Some said that he was not quite human. Some said he was a fairy in disguise. Dion Fortune, writing by candlelight, perched in a prefabricated nest on the Torah's steep slopes, donning the teacher's mantle, a magus doling out her pearls of wisdom to empty vessels for her words, issuing dire warnings about the green ray and its children. If in the slightest doubt, do not go down that road. Don't even think about it. And do be wary of those unnatural freaks, easily identified by their crazed behaviour, unable to fit in, just foaming at the mouth with lust and sleeping with everything in sight. Oh, you can spot them easily enough, given away in Dion's words by their barnyard morality, a desire insatiable and all-consuming. And is it just coincidence that these wild-eyed creatures, like the Russian dancer, are not entirely human, but stained by fairy ancestry? Maybe, though against all odds, we still endure, moving among the self-styled normal people, almost subversively, daring just to be ourselves, while through our hands runs that which is unstoppable, the ceaseless pulsing of the fairy web, energy in perpetual motion, binding our clan as one. The curious hybrids existing in the world of mortals and born to mortal mothers, yet touched by the unworldly. These dwellers on the fringe of everything, these fairy spirits encased in an abode of flesh and blood. Not quite this and not quite that, inhabiting the spaces in between, detached yet sociable, friendly but aloof. Half in, half out is all we know, so why not enjoy it? Let's revel in boundaries dissolved. Let's celebrate the plastic and the flexible. Open to us if only we but know it. States that mortals can but dream of are our birthright. For we too are lords and ladies of the fairy realm. We are the salamander crouching in the hearth at one with the flickering firelight. We are the gnomes toiling in the depths. We are the gentle spirits of the plants dancing in the rain on a wet summer afternoon in a quiet garden. We are the Morgans 9 of Chalice Well, sacred horrors and healers of the veil, the golden glowing liquid of the cup of ecstasy, dispensing carnal pleasures and unearthing your true will. We are Gwynat Neath, fairy king and wild hunt rider, met with in unguarded moments on curving moonlit pathways of the Torah, or in the howling wind upon the summit, the horned one, initiating mortals with the fire of his embrace. We are the queen of fair Elfland, riding upon her milk-white steed, choosing true Thomas as her lover, commanding him to serve her the length of 7 years. One and all of these we are, in the earth beneath your feet, in the air you breathe, in the rushing river and the blazing fire, and all around we are. We are. We are.
Makes you wonder how many changelings or hybrids are in the asylums all around the world,
Well,
or even
sitting-
walking among us.
You're sitting about 2 feet away from one,
Yeah.
as you probably gathered that. I spoke
So you're half pixie or half fairy?
Oh, just fairy will do.
Yeah.
Fairy will do. Well, they all link up anyway. I think that was part of trying to make there. So, you know, there's this one unifying web, if you like. And so
my last
very
name,
plastic.
Elliot, actually means king of the little people, or royalty of the little
what
people.
a wonderful name to have. You're a lucky woman having a name like that. So we go on to the dear old Glastonbury Joker.
Yeah.
He ought to have a fanfare, really. Oh, thank you, Debbie. Here he comes again. As promised, a chaotic entity at the heart of Glaston's weirdness. Now, if you're an adventurous psychonaut, you just might like to try to invoke or evoke him. In my experience, he isn't really bothered with terminology. He may choose to be invoked or he may choose to be evoked. I think he doesn't very often leave the choice to you. He leaves the choice to him, and that's how he likes it. He don't really care which, to be honest. It's all the same to him. Now, if you want to do this, you can assume the bodily shape of a 5-pointed star, and you can play very loudly Prodigy's Outer Space. Everybody who's a Prodigy fan will know Outer Space. It's a great little track, a cut and paste job like many of their earlier ones were, and it's particularly well suited, I think, to the Glastonbury Joker. Now, he appears in spirit vision, or certainly as he appeared to me, as actually a 6-pointed star, a hexagram, with 1 point, the bottom point, actually missing. So there's a bit of crafty joining up. You get a slightly distorted but symmetrical vertical axis of symmetry star pentagram emblazoned with a smiley face. Now, this isn't a Mr. Man face. Mr. Man there are. And it's not a acid face. It's not that either. It's just a smiley face. And the hexagram geometrically, as I'm sure you will know, is generated by the circle. So we've got an immediate link with the irrational quantity pi, representing the infinite and the cosmos. And I think the old Joker's a little bit infinite as well on occasions. So this is called the Glastonbury Joker's Song. The Glastonbury Joker's Song. Glaston is my playground when I dance above the grass. I'll do you a deal, and I'll issue you a pass. Leave for me an offering, a whistle or a mask. Just make your movements fluid, and I might do what you ask. I'm the Glastonbury Joker. I'm a trickster and a fool. So just be loose and playful, but that's the only rule. And now the road is open, so join me in the dance. And now the road is open, so you can leap and prance. So many come to Glaston, but they tie themselves in knots. Their bonds grow ever tighter, yet they try to call shots. But watch the jolly shaman and see him duck and dive, swimming like an eel and feeling so alive. Avalon can crush you, it can chew you into bits. You struggle with white knuckles as you try to score some hits. Like a twig in autumn winds, you stiffen and you break. Don't worry, son, just be assured that Avalon will take. I'm the Glastonbury Joker, I'm a trickster and a fool, so just be loose and playful, but that's the only rule. And now the road is open, so join me in the dance. And now the road is open, so you can leap and prance. They took away the water, and they drained the Isle of Glass. They really made quite certain that strange things would come to pass. Piss off a fairy island where it's so rain all year round, and soon the fates will dump you with your face down on the ground. But H2O's still flowing, so from it take your cue. 'Cause if you can but realise it, there's a lesson there for you. So just be like an otter and frolic, brisk and float. Ride freely with the current like an empty rowing boat. I'm a Glastonbury Joker, I'm a trickster and a fool. So just be loose and playful, for that's the only rule. And now the road is open, so join me in the dance. Now the road is open, so you can leap and prance. Now, I have to tell you something you may have heard before. If you can be Dame Fortune's fool, she'll open up the door. The power's not on the clenched fist, 'cause the power is in the play. So if you can relax your grip, you'll surely win the day. Dive into the billows and leap off from the ledge, and like the stiff old scarecrow that lies tangled in the hedge, Letting go takes courage, but you know it's worth the fee. So sever your attachments and come along with me, 'cause I'm the Glastonbury Joker. I'm a trickster and a fool, so just be loose and playful, 'cause that's the only rule. And now the road is open, so join me in the dance. And now the road is open, so you can leap and prance.
So we're all going to leap and prance across Glastonbury.
Oh, yeah. Not off. Now we got one about dragons.
Oh, we all like dragons.
Oh, we all like dragons. It's nice. Nice that we all like dragons, isn't it? Now, Glastonbury is not immune to the dragon thing. I'm a great fan of the dragon persuasion, I think you would say. Worked magically with dragons on and off since the year 2000, and I find them both stimulating and quite amazing to work with. Now, if you go along Chiltwell Street, assuming that you get off the bus or whatever you get off, or stop your car at Lambrook Street, where what has been Chiltwell Street becomes Lambrook Street, and then it runs into the High Street, and you've got the crossroads. And if you start walking from that crossroads along Lambrook Street, which quickly becomes Chiltwell Street, and you get to the Abbey, Silver Street, going down, you can see the blue dreaming hills, those wonderful blue dreaming hills on the far horizon. And you carry on past the rough-hewn stone of the Abbey wall until you get to Dodd Lane, and on your left you've got Dodd Lane with the famous Dodd Lane Lay, which goes through Stonehenge eventually, going away to your left, and to your right there's the eastern arch, the eastern gateway to the Abbey. And it is a real arch, and you'll see it up above you, a most wonderful carving of a dragon, and he looks like something out in the Muppets. He's got big rubbery feet, and you expect him to make a sort of rubbery flap noise like flippers, like swimming flippers as he marches along. And he looks pretty determined. He knows where he's going, and he's a dragon I've got a great affection for. And it's as if the person who carved that was trying to slightly desanitize the dragons and bring out the comedy element rather than the sort of perhaps more scary element. It's just a lovely depiction of a dragon, actually. I have it on my wall in my room, and I often look at it and think how nice it is. It's a wonderful piece of relief sculpture. And this is about dragons, and it actually is the geographical setting of the poem. Where else but dear old Glaston? Dragons. Amid beauty overgrown, yet still beguiling, they wait with patience, facing the rows of little blank-faced cottages on the road to Shepton Mallet, waiting, watching, unseen by the majority, but then that is their way. Basking in the weak sunshine of a winter afternoon, they stretch their bat-like wings and preen themselves. These beasts, so out of time, with scales like sleek and shining roof tiles, anachronisms from an age that never was, yet to a few so very real. But then that is their way. Pterodactyl cousins perched occasionally upon the arch that forms the Abbey's eastern gate, that arch which in stone still bears the sculpted image of one of their number, worn and weather-beaten by passing centuries, and, by its long-dead carver, rendered safe, sanitised, and even quaint, rubber-footed and striding purposefully forth, yet leaving much unrepresented and unsaid. But then, that is their way. See them dimly in half-light between the spaces, glimpse their shadows, and be in awe of their immensity, wings full unfurled stretching to the horizon. Be wary of their extreme intelligence, their cunning and their guile. Be respectful of their claws, their strength, their wisdom, all of which they never advertise, but then that is their way.
Brilliant. And the dragons are flying over us now.
Absolutely. Yes, as I said before in the sort of preamble before the poem, I have worked with dragons now since 2000, and in that year I encountered rather wonderful entity known as the Red Dragon, who came up and introduced himself to a friend of mine in the middle of a sort of joint working we were doing. And the working passed over, and then a bit subsequent to that, the terrible, awful foot and mouth disease hit the country. And I mean, it was a very tragic and difficult time for us all, and especially for the farming community and the poor animals. And a friend of mine, a little elemental mate of mine called the Gnome, who has been through many strange adventures, magical adventures with me, and some of your listeners may be familiar with him, might have heard me talking about the Gnome. He's never told me his name, he's still just the Gnome. And he came up with this absolutely ace suggestion. He said, look, this foot and mouth business, why don't you declare war on it? Why don't you treat the virus like an enemy, you know, that's got to be nuked? And I said, well, yeah, it's a bloody good idea. And he said, well, call the Red Dragon in, you know, ask him to give you a hand. And it so happened that a friend of mine, in three days after this suggestion has come up, was going to do, she's a Wiccan, and she was going to do a working with her coven, a sort of, let's stamp out foot and mouth virus working, which in many magical groups did. I mean, a great deal of magic was done at that time. And there was going to be apparently a sort of window in the middle of this working where there would be a silent period where people were going to come up with their own images and sort of feed them into a collective whole. And it was an ideal opportunity because the Red Dragon had initially appeared to her. She was familiar with him. He came up and said, I'm out of nowhere, and said, hello, I'm the Red Dragon. So what do you say when someone says that? You just say hello back, don't you? Nice to meet you, Red Dragon, you know. And so she did, and during this ritual, I said, well, so shall I leave it to you? You know, and you're doing something with a lot of oomph in it, obviously. You're doing it with your cup, and there's this window where it can fit in. It looks like this has all been worked out in advance for us, you know. Somebody's sort of working things out. Great, lovely when that happens. So that was what she did, and she did this working. And during this silent period, she was visualising things, and she had this image, this wonderful, stirring image of this massive red dragon flying through the darkening sky. It was just dusk at that time. And it was like a B-17 bomber going off on a daylight raid over Germany in World War II, flying out of East Anglia, you know. And it was like all around it was this escort of small dragons. It was like a load of Mustang escort fighters in World War II. And they just flew with these slow, measured wing beats, and these little ones with a much faster wing beats, they all just disappeared over the horizon and going off to battle with the foot and mouth disease. And it wasn't very long after that the profile of the foot and mouth disease started slipping down as far as the media were concerned, until it had sort of, you know, almost disappeared completely. And I think there's nothing worse than people who claim that their magic has created some great victory, you know, and it's a collective effort. I mean, there were scientists working on it, there were farm people working on it, there were magicians all over the country working on it. A lot of people were working. It was a collective effort, but one does think that this was a damn good idea, and it obviously put quite a lot into that mix that was valid, you know. And, so that's the sort of thing that can happen when you're working with dragons, you know. Yeah. It's very inspiring. I
was living in Wales when the foot and mouth went off, and we were at various moots and things doing obviously prayers and what we could. But to imagine a beautiful red dragon going across, of course in Wales the dragon is red.
Well, absolutely.
So let's hope he was maybe coming from the Welsh end.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because he appeared to another friend of mine, another magician friend of mine, and he announced himself as the Red Dragon of Carnarvon.
Oh wow!
So
yes,
he's a little bit Welsh.
And off they went. What a wonderful sight to have been able to see.
Yes,
Someone needs to paint it, don't they?
Yes, it was a wonderful, wonderful sight. It was like a sort of bombing raid. And this is the Red Dragon. I mean, he uses fire as a cleanser. In the ritual which he'd been involved in with us, you know, he'd used fire as a cleanser. Now, we're not talking physical fire.
No, of course.
It was kind of astral fire, you know. And it actually worked very, very well. So. You know, I've stayed in touch with the Red Dragon. And you can go right ages without meeting them, and then you bump into them and it's like you've just seen them yesterday. I mean, that's what magic's like, because they're living in a totally different time frame to us. I mean, we're sort of governed by the Earth's rotation, aren't we, in 24 hours a day? They're not. I mean, you know, totally different to them.
Well, when you see him again, thank him for everybody.
Yes,
taking part in that battle.
Indeed, I will. Now, how many more have we got left?
We've got two more, Morgan
and
Glaston.
Yes, but it's gone much more quickly than I thought it would. But that's all right, isn't it? That's fine. So,
you're
Morgan.
Ready to carry on?
Right, now, this is a poem called Morgan. No prizes for guessing it's about Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay crops up in a lot of literature from the past, and by the time that Mallory was writing his Arthurian material, she kind of metamorphosised into this big, stereotypical, rather big baddie witch-type figure, which I think is rather a shame. I personally love Morgan. I think she's absolutely marvellous, and see her very much in the role that I'm sure she must have occupied, going back much further than Mr. Mallory's work, and virtually a goddess, certainly a sorceress, an enchantress, and quite a woman. Now, this is the nearest thing, I suppose, in this little reading we come to a poem about sex magic. It's really about that area where sexual magic and devotional magic flow so appealingly into one another. And it's also focusing on the scenario that you get where a given goddess and the landscape which she watches over are inseparable. Now, this is very true of Holder and the Snow Well site in Greenwich Park, which some of your listeners I'm sure will know about. And it's also true of Morgan le Fay, Morgan at Glastonbury. Morgan. Sumptuous and sensual is her nest, deep in the Isle of Apples. Red are her waters, iron-charged and sacred, potent fluids of her dark, beguiling sex. Queen of Avalon and goddess of shamans, she is both and so much more. As the sun sinks below the Somerset levels, Morgan takes wing, gliding through skies of copper in raven form, wheeling, soaring high above the wind-swayed bearers of her sacred fruit. To walk the soil of Avalon is to walk upon her wondrous body, for she is everywhere. From her secure enclosure, Morgan calls her chosen ones, with summons relentless, and to compromise a stranger. Unto them she provides a passage to her realm which nothing can obstruct. She is the passport to a place between spaces, half in one world, the rest elsewhere, somewhere in space, time and geography, a land from which a pass-out is redundant. To hear her call is an honour and a privilege, granted to those souls who number Avalon's chosen. Like the sighing wind or whispered word heard faintly on sleep's borders, her call is undying and unquenchable, its thirst slaked only by response. Morgan, I see you now, lingering on lower slopes of Chalice Hill, clad in a grass-green cape billowed by the breeze, luxuriant auburn curls tumbling across your face, wise, wild and wanton. I see your eyes, dark and enigmatic, your gaze fixing me and pulling me to you. In your form, I see the whole of Avalon. As daylight dies and shadows lengthen, I follow you into the summer night, walking the winding paths of the dark and welcoming garden. You lead me to the lion's mouth, where nature spirits dance like fireflies as your red spring gurgles forth continually. At your advice, I fill the cup and drink, tasting the iron-tanged draught, vital and fresh as ever. The moon climbs higher behind the gardens, bathing them in its gentle glow. All is magical as bodies now move closer, lips engage and hands entwine. As boundaries dissolve, I lose myself in Avalon. Well, this is our last poem. It seems to have gone very, very quickly.
Glastonbury time.
Yes, Glastonbury time. Glastonbury time is no time. There's no time in Glastonbury. When you're there, you're in that strange zone between worlds where you're in both worlds. I like that zone just as well, really, because the one I'm always in. So, why I'm made, it seems. Now, this is, again, a little walk around Glastonbury, this time not to open it up, as it was in the poem Fossou, but just to round things off, and it is very much a wander around. And in this one, I've tried to bring in some of the perhaps slightly lesser-known landmarks, those which maybe the more determined seekers find, rather than the person who wants to do Glastonbury, and you do the tour, and you do Chalice Grove, and if you're lucky, you might do Weary Old Hill as well, or you might forget about it. And that's it. Well, that's not where we're at with this today's stuff at all. We're in for really getting under the skin of that wonderful place and seeing its different aspects. And this is simply a poem called Glaston. Glastonbury of the stained glass grail, hanging in a sunlit window at the bend of Chilkwell Street, shifting gently in the whispering breeze, and filtering a rich mid-blue. Glastonbury of the stark tor, enigmatic as ever, towering above the levels, stopping the heart at first but familiar glimpse, from a bus riding the Mendip crest at Priddy. Glastonbury of the quiet byways, the Maiden's Croft and a lane called Paradise, subtle and comparatively unexplored, modest, unassuming and beautiful. Glastonbury of the gateway, the portal of raw energy, primal and chaotic, fairy island where two worlds overlap continually, the sun bringing joy, to others madness. Glastonbury of the myths and legends, rich melting pot that bubbles with potential, where anything can happen and so often does, where Gwyneth Neath performs a dance with Joe Mathia, and things with no foundation or substantiation are so very real. Glastonbury of the great Zodiac and the blue glass bowl, Glaston of broken dreams, fractured illusions and delusions, Glastonbury of so near and yet so far, where the Joker dances on the early morning dew in bushy coombe, island of the fallen abbey that will one day rise again, and island of my dreams.
Thank you, Jack. We are coming close to the end of time, so I'd just like to say thank you very much for reading all these wonderful poems for us. I recommend everybody, if you can, get to Glastonbury, go and visit the town and the hills and the tours and everything, and catch that magic. If you want any of Jack's books, check out Capel Ban, who will sell them to you. They're the publishers direct, I believe.
Yeah, apart from one.
And I want to thank Atlantis Bookshop, where you can come and buy many wonderful
good
books.
Old Atlantis.
Yeah, good old Atlantis. Magic and lovely ladies.
Indeed, absolutely.
So once again, thank you, Jack, and thank you everybody for listening. And until next time, peace and out.
Thank you, Debbie.